Hello everyone. Tonight we step into the shadowed sands of Shurima, where the sun burns hotter than a politician's promises, and a warrior named Aatrox was forged into something far beyond mortal. Picture this golden dunes stretching endless under a sky that feels like it's judging you, while a towering figure stands, blade in hand, ready to carve history itself. Aatrox wasn't born a monster, he was made, shaped by celestial hands and Shuriman ambition. If you stood against him in those ancient wars, you might not survive it. Trust me, his sword was less forgiving than my Wi-Fi on a stormy day. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for a gentle hum. And let's embark on tonight's journey together. I'm your guide, whispering through the ages, and tonight, I'm diving into Aatrox's story with a voice soft enough to lull you, but sharp enough to keep you hooked. Let's start at the beginning. Before the Darkin, before the blade, Aatrox was once a man, or something close to it, in the ancient empire of Shurima. Back then, Shurima was the place to be think Vegas, but with more sand and fewer slot machines. The sun disk gleamed like a cosmic spotlight, and the Ascended were its rock stars. Aatrox, tall and broad-shouldered, was a warrior of unmatched skill, his laughter booming across battlefields as he swung a blade heavier than my Monday morning regrets. He wasn't just fighting for glory, he was protecting Shurima from threats like void rifts and rebellious tribes. His hands, calloused from years of wielding steel, could have crushed stone. Yet they moved with a grace that made poets jealous. Now, here's a quirky tidbit. Shuriman warriors like Aatrox didn't just train with swords. They practiced a weird dance called the sun. Step to honor the sun disk. Picture Aatrox, all muscle and menace, doing a ceremonial twirl under the stars. Bet you didn't see that coming? Scholars still argue whether this dance was spiritual or just a way to flex their abs, frankly. I'm team abs, but let's not get distracted. Aatrox's life changed when a sun disk's ritual called his name. The Ascended weren't just promoted, they were transformed, infused with celestial power to become god warriors. Aatrox stood before the sun disk, sweat dripping down his brow, the air thick with incense and chants. The priests whispered of destiny, but all he felt was the weight of expectation, like a kid at a spelling bee with the whole village watching. The ritual itself, brutal. Imagine standing in a beam of solar fire, your body unraveling and rebuilding, every nerve screaming louder than a bad karaoke night. Aatrox emerged taller, his skin now a molten gold, his blade fused with starlight. He was no longer just a man, he was a protector, a living weapon. His voice, once human, now rumbled like distant thunder, and his eyes glowed with a fire that could make you forget your own name. He fought void creatures with a ferocity that left craters, his blade singing through the air like it had a personal vendetta. I mean, if I had a sword that cool, I'd probably challenge my neighbor's lawnmower to a duel. Joke aside, Aatrox's new form came with a cost. The celestial power wasn't a gift, it was a leash, pulling him toward wars he didn't always understand. One night, as he rested under a Shuriman palm, Aatrox carved a small sun symbol into his blade's hilt, a habit from his mortal days, a reminder of home. It's the kind of detail you don't expect from a guy who could bench press a camel. That symbol, barely noticeable, grounded him when the celestial voices in his head got too loud. But the wars kept coming. He led armies against void rifts, each victory staining his blade darker. The Shurimans called him the Sunborn, but to his enemies, he was a nightmare wrapped in gold. Ever wonder what it's like to be invincible? Aatrox could tell you it's less fun than it sounds, more like carrying a mountain on your back while everyone cheers. The academic debate around Aatrox's ascension is spicy. Some say the sun disk's power corrupted him from day one. Others argue it was his own ambition that set the stage for his fall. I lean toward the too much cosmic juice theory. But who am I to judge? I'm just here, whispering you into his world, feeling the warm sand under my feet as I imagine Aatrox standing tall, blade gleaming, unaware of the betrayal, waiting like a snake in the dunes. His story starts with glory, but trust me, it's about to get darker than my coffee after a late night edit. For now, picture him under that blazing sun, a hero not yet broken, his laughter still echoing across Shurima's golden sands. The Shuriman sun doesn't just shine at judges, and Aatrox, now an ascended god warrior, felt its gaze heavier than ever. I'm back, your late-night storyteller, weaving through the sands of Aatrox's tale with a voice soft enough to soothe but laced with just enough sarcasm to keep you awake a moment longer. Picture me sitting cross-legged on a dune, the air thick with heat, as I guide you deeper into the story of a man who became a legend, then a curse. Aatrox's ascension was supposed to be his peak, but it was more like signing a contract with the fine print written in celestial fire. Let's dive into the moment his golden glory started to crack, like a cheap mug in a microwave. Aatrox stood atop a Shuriman cliff, his molten gold skin glinting under the midday sun, blade heavier than my existential dread after a bad day. As an Ascended, he was unstoppable, leading Shurima's armies against void rifts with a ferocity that made the desert itself tremble. His sword wasn't just a weapon, it was an extension of his will, carving through enemies like they were made of butter. But the celestial power coursing through him, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. It burned, not just his body, but his mind, whispering promises of eternity while tightening its grip. He'd swing his blade, and the wind would howl, carrying the screams of void creatures and the cheers of his soldiers. Yet every victory left him emptier, like he was pouring himself into a bucket with a hole. Here's a weird aside. Ascended warriors like Aatrox had a quirky habit of collecting battlefield trinkets, bits of armor, broken weapons, even polished stones. Aatrox kept a small, cracked void shard in his belt, a memento from his first rift battle. Bet he didn't expect it to hum faintly at night, like a creepy lullaby. Scholars still bicker over whether these trinkets were trophies or anchors to their fading humanity, honestly. I'd say it's both, but I'm no professor. Back to the story. The turning point came during a war against a massive void incursion. Aatrox led the charge, his blade a comet of light. But the celestial voices in his head grew louder, demanding more destruction. He started to notice the sun disk's power wasn't just amplifying his strength, it was rewriting him, twisting his thoughts toward endless war. One evening, after a battle that left a valley scorched, Aatrox knelt by a desert spring, his reflection warped in the water. His eyes, once human, now glowed like twin suns, and his hand shook as he gripped his blade. "Is this what I am now?" he muttered, his voice a low growl, half to himself, half to the stars. The celestial powers had promised protection for Shurima, but they didn't mention the cost: his freedom, his soul. It's like signing up for a gym membership and finding out you're locked in for eternity. Bad deal, right? Aatrox began questioning the gods who made him, their silence louder than a crowd at a bad comedy show. He wasn't alone in this doubt. Other Ascended, like his comrades Varus and Rost, felt the same itch, the same betrayal brewing under their golden skin. The celestial betrayal hit hardest during a council with Shurima's priests. Aatrox stood before them, towering and radiant, demanding answers. "Why do we bleed for your gods?" he roared, his voice shaking the marble hall. The priests, all robes and fake serenity, offered platitudes about duty. Aatrox wasn't buying it. He stormed out, blade dragging sparks across the floor, leaving the priests whispering like gossiping neighbors. That night, he carved another sun symbol into his blade's hilt, a habit from his mortal days. But this time it felt like defiance. The void shard at his belt hummed louder, as if it knew what was coming. Scholars argue whether this moment sparked Aatrox's fall, or if the Celestials planned it all personally. I think the gods underestimated how stubborn a warrior's heart can be. Aatrox's rage grew, not just at the gods, but at himself. He'd fought for Shurima, for ideals he barely understood anymore. The celestial power was a drug, and he was hooked, but it was killing him. Picture him standing alone under a starless sky, blade planted in the sand, whispering, "I am more than this." It's the kind of moment that makes you want to hug the guy, if he wasn't, a 7-foot murder machine. Joke aside, his transformation into a Darkin was no sudden switch. It was a slow burn, fueled by betrayal and a hunger to reclaim control. The Shuriman Sands, once his home, now felt like a prison, and the celestial voices were the bars. As I whisper this tale, I can almost feel the heat of that desert night, the weight of a blade that carries a man's soul, and the faint hum of a void shard singing him toward ruin. I'm back, your midnight storyteller, guiding you through the scorched sands of Aatrox's saga, with a voice soft as a desert breeze, but sharp enough to cut through the haze of sleep. We're knee-deep in Shurima's ancient wars, where Aatrox, now a towering ascended warrior, is starting to feel the cracks in his celestial armor. Picture a battlefield under a blood-red sky, littered with broken spears and the eerie glow of void rifts. Aatrox stands at the center, his blade a whirlwind of starlight, carving through enemies like they're yesterday's news. The air smells of ash and ambition, and I'm here to walk you through the moment. He became more than a hero. He became a rebel. Let's dive into the chaos of the Darkin War, where Aatrox led his kind into a rebellion that shook Runeterra to its core. Aatrox, his molten gold form towering over Shurima's dunes, wasn't just fighting void creatures anymore. The celestial powers that made him ascended were tightening their grip, whispering commands he couldn't ignore. He'd swing his blade, and the ground would split, but each victory felt like a chain tightening around his soul. The other ascended Varus, Rust, and countless others were feeling it too. They'd been promised godhood, but what they got was a leash. Aatrox, never one to sit quietly, started talking rebellion. "We're not pawns," he growled to Varus one night, his voice like a storm brewing. Varus, all sharp angles and sharper wit, nodded, his own eyes glowing with defiance. Together they rallied the Ascended, their voices echoing across Shurima's war camps like a call to arms. Here's a quirky tidbit during these war councils. Aatrox had a habit of balancing his massive blade on one finger, like a kid spinning a stick. It was his way of staying calm while plotting cosmic treason. Imagine a 7-foot demigod doing party tricks. Scholars still debate whether this was a sign of his lingering humanity or just boredom. My money's on him showing off. Back to the story. The Darkin War wasn't just a skirmish. It was a full-blown uprising. Aatrox led the charge, his blade tearing through mortal armies who dared oppose the Ascended's rebellion. He wasn't fighting for Shurima anymore. He was fighting for freedom, for a world where he could wield his power without celestial strings. Cities burned, mountains crumbled, and Aatrox laughed, a sound that made even the bravest warriors rethink their life choices. One battle stands out, the siege of Icathia. Aatrox stormed the city with his Darkin kin, their blades singing a symphony of destruction. Icathia's mages had opened a void rift, thinking they could control its spoiler alert. They couldn't. Aatrox waded into the chaos, his sword cleaving through void spawn like they were made of paper. "This is our world," he roared, his voice drowning out the rift screams. But the Celestials weren't watching idly. They sent their aspects, think Pantheon's ancestors, all shiny and self-righteous, to quash the rebellion. Aatrox faced one, a warrior of Targon clad in starlight, and their clash shook the earth. Sparks flew, the sky cracked, and I swear, if I was there, I'd have spilled my coffee. Joke aside, Aatrox's blade met the aspect's spear, and for a moment he felt alive, unbound. But freedom came at a cost. The Darkin's rebellion wasn't unified. Some, like Aatrox, wanted liberation. Others just wanted chaos. He saw his kin turn on each other, their celestial power twisting into something darker, hungrier. Aatrox, standing atop a ruined Icathian tower, blade dripping with ichor, began to feel it too, a gnawing hunger in his core, like a bad hangover that wouldn't quit. He carved another sun symbol into his blade's hilt, a desperate grasp at his old self, but the void shard at his belt pulsed louder, whispering promises of power. The academic argument here is heated. Did the Darkin's fall come from celestial manipulation or their own pride? I'd say it's a mix. Give a guy godlike power and a grudge, and he's bound to make bad choices. Aatrox's rebellion wasn't just about fighting mortals or gods. It was about defying his own fate. "I am no one's weapon," he muttered under a shattered moon, his blade planted in the ground. But the more he fought, the more he felt the celestial curse sinking deeper, turning him into something he couldn't recognize. Picture him, a golden giant in a sea of corpses, staring at his reflection in a broken shield, wondering if he was still the hero Shurima once cheered. It's the kind of moment that hits harder than a Monday morning alarm. As I whisper this tale, I can feel the weight of his blade, the heat of Icathia's ruins, and the faint hum of that void shard, pulling him toward a darkness he couldn't yet name. I'm back, your late-night guide, whispering through the ashes of Aatrox's tail with a voice as soft as a Shuriman breeze, but edged with enough bite to keep you tethered to this story. Picture a battlefield gone quiet, the sand stained black with void ichor, and Aatrox, a golden giant, standing alone under a sky that feels like it's holding its breath. The Darkin war has left scars across Runeterra, and Aatrox, once a beacon of Shuriman glory, is about to face his cruelest fate yet. His rebellion against the Celestials has painted a target on his back, and the gods aren't known for playing nice. Tonight, we dive into the moment Aatrox was stripped of his body and bound to his own blade, a prison worse than any dungeon. Let's walk this shadowed path together, feeling the weight of a warrior's fall. Aatrox's rebellion had shaken the heavens, but the Celestials weren't about to let their golden boy run wild. After the siege of Acathia, where he carved through void spawn and mortal armies alike, the aspects of Targon descended with a vengeance. Picture a circle of glowing figures, their armor shimmering like stars, surrounding Aatrox on a shattered plain. His blade, still dripping with ichor, hummed with defiance, but the air was thick with magic old, cosmic, and meaner than my neighbor when I forget to return his lawnmower. Aatrox roared, "You cannot chain me," his voice a thunderstorm. But the aspects weren't listening. They chanted in a language that made the ground quake, and before he could swing, a blinding light engulfed him. His body, that towering mass of molten gold, began to dissolve like sugar in hot tea. Not gonna lie, if I were him, I'd have screamed louder than a cat in a bathtub. Here's a quirky tidbit. The aspects didn't just trap Aatrox, they sealed his essence into his blade using a spell that required a rare Shuriman crystal, said to glow like a dying star. Locals swore those crystals sang at night, which is creepy as hell. Scholars still argue whether the crystals were celestial tech or just fancy rocks. My vote's on fancy rocks with bad vibes. Back to the story. Aatrox's consciousness didn't fade. It was sucked into his sword, a massive slab of steel that now pulsed with his rage. He was no longer flesh, no longer free, just a voice trapped in metal, screaming into an endless void. Imagine being stuck in an elevator with no buttons. Forever. That's Aatrox's new reality. His blade was buried deep in a Shuriman tomb, the kind of place where even scorpions don't linger, sealed with runes that burn to the touch. At first, Aatrox fought his prison, his mind clawed at the blade's edges, his voice echoing inside. I am Aatrox, I am no slave. But the runes held tight, and the silence was louder than any battlefield. Days turned to years, then centuries, and Aatrox's rage simmered into something colder, sharper. He could sense the world outside, faint tremors of footsteps, the hum of life, but he was cut off, a god reduced to a relic. One night, a grave robber, some poor soul, desperate for treasure, brushed the blade's hilt. Aatrox's voice, now a whisper, like wind through bones, stirred. Take me, and no power. The robber didn't last long. Spoiler. Nobody does, but it was Aatrox's first taste of influence, like a shark smelling blood. The academic debate around Aatrox's imprisonment is a nerdy cage match. Some say the Celestials trapped him to protect Runeterra. Others argue it was punishment for daring to defy their cosmic ego. I'm team gods are petty, but you decide. Aatrox's blade, now his prison, wasn't just a cage, it was a curse. It let him whisper to the living, tempting them with promises of strength, but every touch drained their soul. He carved a new sun symbol into the blade's essence, not with hands, but with sheer will, a flicker of his old defiance. Picture him, or what's left of him, trapped in that cold steel, feeling the weight of eternity like a bad hangover that never ends. Joke aside, it's the kind of fate that makes you glad you're just a mortal, maybe even grateful for that 9 to 5 grind. As centuries passed, Aatrox learned his prison's rules. He could sense the world through vibrations, wars, betrayals, the rise and fall of empires. Each time someone touched his blade, he'd whisper, "I can make you a god." Most went mad, their bodies crumbling under his power. But Aatrox didn't care. He was biding his time, his rage a fire that never dimmed. The void shard, still tucked in his belt when he was sealed, was gone, but its echo lingered in his mind, a faint hum that mocked him. As I whisper this tale, I can almost feel the cold steel of his blade, the runes burning against my fingers, and the weight of a warrior's soul, screaming for release under a starless Shuriman sky. I'm here again, your nocturnal narrator, slipping through the sands of Aatrox's cursed tale, with a voice as smooth as a Shuriman night, but with just enough edge to keep you from dozing off completely. We're standing at the edge of a forgotten tomb, where Aatrox's blade lies buried, pulsing with a rage that could wake the dead. Imagine the air thick with dust, the silence broken only by the faint hum of a sword that's more than steel. It's a prison for a darkened soul. Aatrox, once a god warrior, now a whisper in the dark, is about to reach out to the living for the first time in centuries. Tonight, we dive into his first attempt to break free, tempting a desperate mortal with promises of power. Let's step into this shadowed moment, feeling the cold grip of a blade that hungers, deep in that Shuriman tomb. Aatrox's blade rested, its runes glowing faintly, like a nightlight for nightmares. Centuries had passed since the aspects sealed him, and his rage had hardened into something patient, calculating. He wasn't just screaming into the void anymore. He was listening, sensing the world through the blade's steel. Footsteps echoed above, hesitant and heavy, belonging to a warrior named Kyle, a Shuriman outcast, fleeing a lost war. Kale was no hero. Think of him as a guy who'd sell his camel for a second chance. His hands, scarred from battles he barely survived, brushed the blade's hilt, and Aatrox stirred. "Take me," he whispered, his voice a low growl, like wind rattling through bones. Kale froze, his heart pounding louder than a bad DJ at a wedding. "Power awaits," Aatrox purred, and I swear, if I heard that voice, I'd drop the sword and run faster than a cat dodging a vacuum. Here's a quirky aside. Shuriman tombs like Aatrox's were often rigged with trap spikes, poison darts, the works, but locals swore the real danger was the singing stones near cursed relics. They hummed tunes nobody could place, like an ancient Spotify playlist gone rogue. Scholars debate whether these stones were magical or just desert wind playing tricks. I'm betting on magic, because who's got time to carve wind-powered jukeboxes? Back to the story. Kale, desperate and half-mad from hunger, gripped the blade tighter. Aatrox's voice slithered into his mind, painting visions of glory armies, kneeling, cities burning. "Kyle, a king. You are weak," Aatrox taunted, "but I can make you more." Kyle, poor guy, didn't stand a chance. He lifted the blade, its weight unnatural, and felt a rush of strength like chugging 10 energy drinks at once. The moment Kale claimed the blade, Aatrox tested his leash. His consciousness surged, probing Kale's mind, tasting his fears and ambitions. It wasn't possession, not yet, but a conversation, like a shady salesman pitching a timeshare. Aatrox learned fast mortals were fragile, their souls flickering like candles in a storm. Kale swung the blade at a tomb wall, shattering stone like it was cardboard, laughing like he'd won the lottery. "This is power," he shouted, his voice echoing. Aatrox, inside, smirked or would have if he had a face. "Keep going, fool," he thought, his voice a whisper only Kale could hear. But the blade's curse was already at work. Kale's hands blistered, his eyes flickered red, and his dreams turned to blood-soaked battlefields. It's like signing up for a free trial and finding out it costs your soul. Classic Aatrox move. The academic argument around Aatrox's whispering is a nerd fight for the ages. Some say he manipulated mortals out of spite. Others claim it was his only way to feel alive. I'd argue it's both. Imagine being stuck in a sword for centuries. You'd probably mess with people too. Kale lasted a month before his body started failing, his skin cracking like dry earth. Aatrox didn't care. He was learning, refining his pitch. He carved another sun symbol into the blade's essence, a ritual that felt like spitting in the celestials' faces. Picture Kale stumbling through the desert, blade dragging, muttering to himself, while Aatrox whispered, "More. You need more." It's the kind of tragedy that makes you glad you're just listening to this story, maybe with a fan humming softly nearby. Aatrox's whispers didn't stop with Kyle. The blade passed to others thieves, warlords, fools chasing glory, each one a lesson in mortal weakness. He'd lie dormant for decades, then stir when someone touched the hilt. His voice always ready, "I can make you eternal." The tomb's runes weakened over time, and Aatrox felt his prison's edges fraying, like a pair of jeans after too many washes. Joke aside, each touch brought him closer to freedom, but never close enough. As I whisper this tale, I can feel the blade's cold steel, the hum of its runes, and the weight of Aatrox's voice, luring another soul into a dance he'd never let them win. I'm back, your late-night companion, whispering through the dunes of Aatrox's cursed saga, with a voice as soft as moonlit sand, but sharp enough to keep you tethered to this tale. We're deep in the shadows now, where Aatrox's blade, a prison of steel and rage, lies waiting in a Shuriman tomb. The air is heavy with dust and desperation, and Aatrox, no longer just a whisper, is about to take his first real step toward freedom. Picture a lone warrior, Kale, clutching the blade, his eyes flickering with a red glow that isn't his own. Tonight, we dive into the moment Aatrox consumes his first host, tasting the fleeting thrill of flesh again. Let's walk this dark path, feeling the pulse of a sword that hungers for more than blood. Kale, that poor Shuriman outcast, thought he'd hit the jackpot when he found Aatrox's blade. Its weight felt like destiny, its whispers like a friend who's way too good at peer pressure. "You are nothing," Aatrox murmured, his voice slithering through Kale's mind like smoke. "But with me, you are everything." Kyle, half-starved and full of dreams, swung the blade at a band of raiders, And oh boy, it was like watching a blender meet a fruit salad. The blade moved faster than his reflexes should have allowed, carving through armor with a scream that wasn't entirely steel. Kale laughed, drunk on power, but Aatrox was already sinking his claws deeper. The first possession wasn't gentle. It was like inviting a tornado to crash on your couch. Aatrox's essence flooded Kale's body, his thoughts drowning in a sea of rage and celestial fire. Here's a quirky tidbit. Shuriman folklore says possessed warriors like Kale would hum an eerie tune under their breath, a melody tied to the blade's runes. Locals called it the Darkin's lullaby, claiming it drove dogs mad. Scholars still bicker over whether it was Aatrox's influence or just bad singing. My money's on Aatrox being a terrible DJ. Back to the story. Aatrox didn't just control Kyle, he rewrote him. Kale's muscles bulged unnaturally, his skin cracked like baked clay, and his eyes burned red, glowing brighter than my phone screen at 2A. More. Aatrox roared through Kale's mouth, and the warrior charged into a nearby village, blade swinging like it had a personal grudge. Villagers fled, screaming about a demon, and honestly, they weren't wrong. If I saw that coming, I'd hide faster than my cat when it's bath time. Aatrox reveled in the chaos, feeling the world through Kale's senses, the crunch of bone under his blade, the heat of blood on his hands. For the first time in centuries, he could taste the desert air, hear the winds howl. This is life, he bellowed. Kale's voice twisted into something monstrous, but the body was weak, crumbling under the strain of a Darkin's power. Kale's heart raced, his bones groaned, and within days his body was a husk, like a cheap Halloween costume after one wear. Aatrox didn't care he was learning. Next time, he whispered as Kale collapsed, the blade falling to the sand. The possession was a test run, and Aatrox was already eyeing his next ride, like a kid picking a better toy at the arcade. The academic debate here is a real head-scratcher. Did Aatrox consume hosts out of necessity, or just because he enjoyed the thrill? I'd say it's like me with coffee, both a need and a guilty pleasure. Aatrox carved another sun symbol into his blade's essence, a defiant tick mark in his endless prison. Each host taught him more how to push a body to its limits, how to twist a mind without breaking it. Kale's death was just the start. The blade was found again, passed from one fool to another, mercenaries, warlords, even a poet who thought he could tame the demon. Spoiler, he couldn't. Aatrox's whispers grew sharper, his promises sweeter. I am your salvation, he'd purr, and mortals, dumb as a bag of hammers, kept listening. Picture the blade now, lying in the sand where Kale fell, its runes glowing faintly under a starless sky. Aatrox waited, patient as a spider, his rage a fire that never dimmed. He could feel the world moving, wars, betrayals, the hum of life beyond his prison. Each possession was a taste of freedom, but it was never enough. He wanted more than a borrowed body. He wanted to break the blade, to be whole again. Joke aside, it's like being stuck in a group chat you can't leave, except the notifications are mortal screams. As I whisper this tale, I can feel the blade's cold steel, the weight of Aatrox's hunger, and the faint echo of that Darkin's lullaby, pulling another soul toward ruin. I'm back, your shadowy storyteller, weaving through the endless torment of Aatrox's tale, with a voice as soft as a Shuriman dusk, but with a bite to keep you from drifting too far into sleep. Picture a desolate canyon, the sand littered with bones, and Aatrox's blade lying there, its runes pulsing like a heartbeat that refuses to quit. He's no longer just a prisoner in steel, he's a predator, learning to bend mortals to his will. Tonight, we sink into the endless cycle of Aatrox's possessions, each host a fleeting taste of freedom that crumbles under his cosmic rage. The air feels heavy with desperation, and I'm here to guide you through this parade of doomed souls, feeling the cold grip of a blade that's more alive than the men who wield it. After Kale's body turned to dust, Aatrox's blade didn't stay buried long. It called to the desperate, the ambitious, the broken, anyone foolish enough to think they could master a Darkin. A Noxian mercenary named Varric was next, a grizzled man with scars deeper than my sarcasm. He found the blade in a raided Shuriman caravan, its hilt warm despite the desert chill. "You seek strength," Aatrox whispered, his voice like gravel underfoot. Varric, who'd lost everything but his pride, grabbed the blade, and Aatrox surged in, flooding his veins with power. Varric's muscles swelled, his eyes glowed red, and he carved through a rival warband like they were paper dolls. "I am a god," he shouted, but Aatrox's laugh echoed in his skull, low and mocking. "You're a rental," he thought, and if I were Varric, I'd have dropped the blade faster than a bad Tinder date. Here's a quirky tidbit. Shuriman nomads swore that Aatrox's blade left faint scorch marks on the ground, like it was too angry to stay still. They called it the Wanderer's Curse, claiming it drew vultures in circles overhead. Scholars argue whether these marks were magical residue or just desert heat, playing tricks I'm betting on Aatrox's bad mood, leaving a literal burn. Back to the story. Varric lasted longer than Kyle, maybe 2 months, before his body gave out. Aatrox pushed him too far, battles day and night. No rest, just blood and glory. Varric's skin cracked, his bones splintered, and one day, mid-swing, he collapsed, the blade clattering to the ground. Aatrox didn't pause to mourn. He was already whispering to the next fool, a Shuriman thief named Lyra, who thought she could sell the blade for a fortune. Spoiler, she didn't. Lyra's possession was messier. Aatrox learned to pace himself, stretching her body's limits like a cheap pair of jeans. She moved faster, fought harder, her dagger strikes guided by a force she couldn't name. "You're mine," Aatrox growled in her mind, and Lyra, all bravado, snapped back, "I use you, demon." Oh, honey, that's like arguing with a tsunami. Aatrox let her believe she was in control, guiding her to raid a Noxian outpost. The carnage was spectacular think-action movie with a budget of rage. But Lyra's body wasn't built for a Darkin. Her hands bled, her vision blurred, and one night she screamed, "Get out of my head," before collapsing under a palm tree. Aatrox, unfazed, carved another sun symbol into his blade's essence, a tally of his defiance against the Celestials who trapped him. The academic debate around Aatrox's possessions is a scholarly cage match. Some say he consumed hosts to escape his prison. Others argue he was addicted to the rush of flesh, like a cosmic adrenaline junkie. I'd say it's both. Imagine being stuck in a sword for centuries. You'd probably joyride a few bodies too. The cycle continued: a Bilgewater pirate, a Dalmatian deserter, even a scholar who thought he could study the blade. Each one fell, their bodies too frail for Aatrox's power. He learned to savor the moments, feeling the wind, tasting blood, hearing screams. "This is life," he'd whisper through their lips, even as their hearts gave out. It's like borrowing a car you know you're going to crash dark, but Aatrox didn't care. Picture the blade now, lying in a bilgewater dock after the pirate's demise, its runes glowing under a foggy moon. Aatrox waited, his rage a fire that never dimmed, each host a lesson in mortal weakness. He'd whisper, "I am your salvation," and they'd listen, drawn like moths to a flame that burned too bright. Joke aside, it's like signing up for a marathon with no training. Your legs give out, and Aatrox is the one laughing. As I whisper this tale, I can feel the blade's weight, the hum of its runes, and the echo of Aatrox's voice, luring another soul into a dance they'd never survive. I'm back, your late-night guide, slipping through the shadows of Aatrox's cursed tale, with a voice as soft as a Noxian fog, but sharp enough to keep you from drifting too far into dreams. Picture a war-torn valley in Noxus, the air thick with smoke and the clang of steel, where Aatrox's blade has resurfaced after centuries of passing through doomed hosts. The sand and silence of Shurima are far behind, replaced by the gritty chaos of a nation that thrives on blood. Tonight, we dive into Aatrox's reawakening in Noxus, where he unleashes his rage against armies, a Darkin unbound in a world that's forgotten his name. Let's step into this battlefield, feeling the weight of a blade that carves not just flesh, but history itself. The blade found its way to Noxus through a warlord named Tharok, a brute with ambitions bigger than his brain. He'd scavenged it from a black market caravan, drawn to its pulsing runes like a moth to a flame. "You seek dominion," Aatrox whispered, his voice a low rumble, like thunder trapped in a bottle. Tharok, all muscle and ego, gripped the blade, and Aatrox surged in, his essence flooding the warlord's body. Tharok's eyes burned red, his frame swelled to monstrous proportions, and he laughed, thinking he'd tamed a god. Spoiler, he was wronger than my attempt at baking bread. Aatrox took control, turning Tharok into a puppet of destruction. They stormed a Noxian battlefield where rival clans clashed over a contested stronghold. Aatrox, through Tharok, swung the blade, and it was like watching a hurricane carve a path through a forest. Soldiers fell, walls crumbled, and the ground drank deep. Here's a quirky tidbit. Noxian soldiers later swore the blade left echoes of laughter in the air, a deep, mocking chuckle that lingered like bad cologne. Locals called it the Darkin's Jest, claiming it spooked their horses. Scholars debate whether this was Aatrox's voice or just the wind playing tricks. I'm betting on Aatrox, because who else laughs during a massacre? Back to the story. The Battle of Noxus wasn't just a fight. It was Aatrox's stage. He waded through armies, his blade a blur of starlight and blood, each swing tearing through steel and bone. "This is power," he roared through Tharok's throat, his voice shaking the valley. Noxian commanders, used to winning through brute force, froze as this towering figure, half man, half nightmare, cut their ranks to ribbons. If I were there, I'd have hidden behind the nearest rock, clutching my coffee like a lifeline. Tharok's body, though, wasn't built for a Darkin. His muscles tore, his skin split, and within days he was staggering, his eyes flickering like a dying lantern. Aatrox didn't care he was drunk on freedom, savoring the chaos. He drove Tharok into another battle, this time against a Noxian legion led by a grizzled general named Vara. She faced him, her spear raised, shouting, "You're no god, just a parasite." Aatrox laughed, a sound that made the ground tremble, and swung. Vara dodged, barely, but her legion wasn't so lucky. The academic debate here is fierce. Did Aatrox choose Noxus for its warlike culture, or was it just bad luck for Tharok? I'd say Aatrox saw Noxus as a playground, give a Darkin a nation of warmongers, and it's like handing a kid a flamethrower. Aatrox carved another sun symbol into his blade's essence, a defiant mark against the Celestials who trapped him. Each swing was a rebellion, each kill a middle finger to the gods. But Tharok's body was failing fast, his heart pounding like a drum solo gone wrong. Aatrox pushed him harder, whispering, "Fight, or you're nothing." Tharok collapsed mid-battle, the blade clattering to the ground, and Aatrox retreated into its steel, his rage undimmed. The Noxians, shaken, buried the blade under rubble, thinking it cursed. Joke aside, it's like trying to hide a bad breakup by deleting texts. It doesn't work. Aatrox waited, his voice ready to call the next fool. Picture the blade now, buried under Noxian stone, its runes glowing faintly, a predator in the dark. As I whisper this tale, I can feel the heat of that battlefield, the weight of a blade that carries a Darkin's wrath, and the echo of Aatrox's laughter, mocking a world that thinks it can contain him. I'm back, your midnight guide, weaving through the blood-soaked threads of Aatrox's saga, with a voice as gentle as a Targon breeze, but with just enough sting to keep you hooked. We're standing on a jagged cliff under a starlit sky, where Aatrox, now a force of destruction in a stolen body, faces a foe who dares to defy him. The air smells of ozone and defiance, and his blade hums with a rage that could shatter mountains. Tonight, we dive into Aatrox's clash with Pantheon, the mortal warrior who carries the aspect of war, a battle that tests the Darkin's godlike power. Let's step into this celestial showdown, feeling the weight of a blade that craves not just victory, but annihilation. Aatrox had resurfaced in a new host, a Noxian deserter named Callan, whose body was barely holding together under the Darkin's will. Callan's frame, swollen with unnatural strength, lumbered across Targon's slopes, Aatrox's blade dragging sparks across the stone. He'd heard whispers of a warrior blessed by the stars, a man called Pantheon, who wielded a spear and shield like he was born for war. Aatrox, never one to back down, sought him out, his voice booming through Callan's throat. "Show me this mortal who claims war as his own." The clash happened at dusk, on a plateau where the wind howled like a bad karaoke singer. Pantheon stood tall, his armor gleaming with celestial light, his spear pointed at Aatrox. "You're a shadow of a god." Pantheon spat, and I swear, if I were there, I'd have grabbed popcorn and ducked behind a boulder. Here's a quirky tidbit. Targon's warriors, like Pantheon, had a weird tradition of carving star patterns into their weapons before battle, believing it channeled celestial favor. Locals swore the carvings glowed during fights, which is cool, but also sounds like a fire hazard. Scholars debate whether this was divine magic or just shiny paint. My vote's on paint, because gods don't need glow sticks. Back to the story. Aatrox charged, his blade a comet of blood and starlight, each swing shaking the ground like a tantrum from a cosmic toddler. Pantheon met him head-on, his spear darting like a viper, his shield blocking blows that would have split mountains. The clash was brutal. Sparks flew. The air cracked, and Aatrox laughed, a sound deeper than a Noxian war drum. "You think you know war," he roared. Kalen's voice warped into something monstrous. Pantheon didn't flinch, his eyes burning with defiance. The fight wasn't just physical, it was a clash of wills. Aatrox, fueled by centuries of rage, saw Pantheon as a mockery of his own lost glory. "I was war before you were born," he snarled, his blade slicing through Pantheon's shield, leaving a gash that glowed red. Pantheon countered, his spear grazing Kalen's chest, and Aatrox felt it a sting, a reminder he was bound to a frail body. Kalen's form was crumbling, blood seeping from cracks in his skin, but Aatrox pushed harder, whispering, "More, mortal, give me more Pantheon." Battered but unyielding, shouted back, "You're no god, you're a cage. It's like watching two stubborn rams butt heads, except one's a Darkin and the other's got celestial backup. Joke aside, if I were betting, I'd put my gold on a guy with a spear he's got better cardio." The academic debate here is a scholarly slugfest. Did Pantheon's defiance prove mortals could challenge Darkin, or was Aatrox just toying with him? I'd say Aatrox underestimated Pantheon's grit. Mortals are squishy, but they're stubborn as hell. Aatrox carved another sun symbol into his blade's essence, a defiant mark against the Celestials who sent Pantheon. The battle ended in a stalemate. Kalen's body collapsed, unable to withstand Aatrox's power, and the blade fell to the plateau, runes pulsing angrily. Pantheon, wounded but alive, walked away, his spear still gleaming. Aatrox, trapped again in steel, seethed, his voice echoing in the dark. "This is not the end. Picture the blade now, lying among Targon's rocks, its glow a challenge to the stars above. As I whisper this tale, I can feel the clash's echoes, the weight of Aatrox's rage, and the faint hum of his blade, waiting for its next chance to defy the heavens. I'm back, your twilight guide, drifting through the embers of Aatrox's cursed tale, with a voice as soft as Shurima's fading dusk, but with just enough edge to keep you tethered to this story." We're wandering the desolate sands now, where Aatrox, bound to his blade, roams without a host, a specter of rage haunting the ruins of his past. Picture a desert under a merciless sun, dunes stretching like scars across Shurima's heart, and a blade that hums with a hunger no mortal can sate. Tonight, we follow Aatrox as he wanders his homeland's ruins, grappling with memories of his ascended glory and the betrayal that broke him. Let's tread these haunted sands, feeling the weight of a Darkin's endless torment. Aatrox's blade had been picked up again, this time by a Shuriman scavenger named Zara, a wiry woman with more courage than sense. She found it half buried in a crumbled temple, its runes glowing like embers in the sand. "You seek purpose," Aatrox whispered, his voice a dry rasp, like wind over bones. Zara, driven by tales of ancient treasures, gripped the blade, and Aatrox surged in, her body twisting under his will. Her eyes burned red. Her frame swelled. But Aatrox wasn't here for conquest, not yet. He drove Zara's body through Shurima's ruins, past shattered statues of ascended heroes, their stone faces mocking him. "This was my empire," He growled through her lips, his voice heavy with centuries of loss. If I were Zara, I'd have ditched the blade faster than a bad blind date. But she pressed on, drawn by Aatrox's promises of power. Here's a quirky tidbit. Shuriman ruins are littered with so-called weeping statues, carved to honor fallen Ascended, said to drip water at dawn. Locals claimed they cried for Aatrox's betrayal, which is poetic, but probably just leaky stone. Scholars argue whether these statues were memorials or warnings. My bet's on warnings, because who carves a statue for a guy like Aatrox? Back to the story. Aatrox guided Zara to a forgotten Ascended temple, its walls etched with scenes of his past victories. Golden warriors battling void rifts, their blades blazing. He paused, Zara's hands trembling as she traced a carving of himself, towering and proud. "I was a god," he whispered, and for once his voice cracked, like a man remembering a home he'd never see again. The memory hit hard, stirring something buried under his rage regret, maybe, or just the ghost of who he'd been. Zara's body, frail under Aatrox's power, stumbled through the ruins, the blade dragging sparks across stone. Aatrox felt the desert's heat through her skin, smelled the dust of his homeland. But it wasn't enough. Shurima's sands, once his battlefield, now felt like a graveyard. He stopped at a crumbled sun disk altar, its golden surface cracked like his own dreams. They promised eternity. He snarled. Zara's voice warped into a growl. He swung the blade, shattering the altar, and the sound echoed like a laugh from the gods who betrayed him. It's like smashing your ex's favorite mug cathartic, but it doesn't fix anything. Aatrox's rage grew, fueled by memories of his ascension, the celestial voices that lied, and the void shard's hum, long gone but still echoing in his mind. The academic debate here is a dusty one. Did Aatrox wander Shurima to reclaim his past? Or was he just lost? Chasing ghosts? I'd say it's both rage and nostalgia make a messy cocktail. He carved another sun symbol into his blade's essence, a defiant mark against the Celestials, but it felt hollow. Zara's body was failing, her skin cracking like parched earth, her breath shallow. Aatrox pushed her forward, whispering, "Keep moving, mortal!" She collapsed near a dried oasis, the blade falling beside her, and Aatrox retreated into its steel, his rage a fire that burned hotter with each failure. Picture the blade now, half buried in sand, its runes glowing faintly under a starless sky, surrounded by ruins that whisper of a glory long gone. Joke aside, it's like being stuck in a hometown you hate. Every corner reminds you of what you lost. As I whisper this tale, I feel the desert's heat, the weight of Aatrox's memories, and the faint hum of a blade that refuses to forget. I'm back, your nocturnal narrator, slipping through the shadowed sands of Aatrox's cursed tale, with a voice as soft as a Shuriman twilight, but sharp enough to keep you from drifting too far into sleep. We're deep in the desert now, where Aatrox's blade lies under a cracked sky, its runes pulsing like a heartbeat that refuses to fade. Picture a desolate Shuriman outpost, half swallowed by dunes, where a new host carries Aatrox's wrath, stumbling through a world that feels both familiar and alien. Tonight, we dive into a rare moment where Aatrox finds a mysterious crimson pendant, a trinket that fuels his rage and stirs something deeper, something almost human. Let's wander these haunted sands, feeling the weight of a Darkin's endless hunger and the faint flicker of something lost. The blade had found a new host, a Shuriman wanderer named Joran, a man with eyes like storm clouds and a heart heavy with grief. Joran, fleeing a raided village, found the blade in a crumbled shrine, its hilt warm against the desert chill. "You seek vengeance," Aatrox whispered, his voice a low growl, like fire crackling in a storm. Joran gripped the blade, and Aatrox surged in, his essence twisting Joran's body into something monstrous muscles, bulging, eyes glowing red. They roamed Shurima's wastes, Aatrox driving Joran toward ruins that whispered of his ascended past. One night, in a forgotten tomb, Joran's trembling hands unearthed a crimson pendant, its surface etched with a sun symbol like the ones Aatrox carved. The pendant pulsed faintly, warm as blood, and Aatrox felt a jolt, like a memory he couldn't place. "What are you?" he muttered through Joran's lips, his voice softer than usual. "If I were Joran, I'd have tossed that thing faster than a bad takeout order." But Aatrox was hooked. "Here's a quirky tidbit. Shuriman tombs often hid trinkets like this pendant, said to be crafted by ascended priests to honor fallen warriors. Locals claimed they glowed when touched by cursed souls, which is creepy, but also kind of romantic. Scholars debate whether these were relics of devotion or traps for the unwary. My money's on traps, because nothing in Shurima's ever that sweet." Back to the story, Aatrox, through Joran, held the pendant, its warmth seeping into his host's cracked hands. It wasn't just a trinket, it was a spark, igniting memories of his mortal days, of laughter under Shuriman palms, of a life before the Celestials turned him into a weapon. The pendant's glow reminded him of the sun disk as fire, and for a moment, Aatrox's rage faltered, replaced by a pang of something he couldn't name: regret, maybe, or longing. He clutched it tighter, Joran's fingers bleeding, and snarled, "I am not yours to mock." The pendant's discovery drove Aatrox into a frenzy. He pushed Joran to hunt bandits who'd raided nearby villages, his blade carving through them like a scythe through wheat. "Feel my wrath," he roared, Joran's voice a twisted echo of his own. The pendant, tucked into Joran's belt, pulsed with each kill as if feeding on the chaos. Aatrox felt its power, faint but undeniable, amplifying his rage like a shot of espresso to my morning grumpiness. He stormed a bandit camp, the blade a blur of blood and starlight, leaving bodies scattered like leaves in a storm. Joran, barely holding together, whispered, "This isn't me," but Aatrox drowned him out, his voice a thunderclap. "You are nothing without me." It's like letting a bad roommate take over your life, messy and doomed. The academic debate around relics like the pendant is a nerdy brawl. Some say they were celestial tools to control Ascended. Others argue they were sentimental keepsakes. I'd say they're trouble, like finding a cursed ring in a fantasy novel. Aatrox carved another sun symbol into his blade's essence, a defiant mark, but the pendant's glow lingered in his mind, a taunt from a past he couldn't reclaim. Joran's body was failing, his skin splitting like dry earth, his breaths ragged. Aatrox pushed him harder, the pendant's warmth a cruel reminder of his lost humanity. Joran collapsed in a ruined courtyard, the blade and pendant falling beside him, and Aatrox retreated into the steel, his rage burning hotter than ever. Picture the blade now, half buried in sand, the pendant's faint glow beside it, under a sky that offers no answers. Joke aside, it's like finding an old photo that makes you miss who you were except for Aatrox. It just makes him madder. As I whisper this tale, I feel the pendant's heat, the blade's weight, and the echo of a Darkin's rage, fueled by a trinket that dares to remind him of home. I'm back, your late-night whisperer, guiding you through the blood-stained sands of Aatrox's relentless saga, with a voice as soft as a Damatian dawn, but with just enough grit to keep you anchored to this tale. Picture a fortified city under a steel-gray sky, its banners fluttering like nervous heartbeats, as Aatrox's blade finds a new host in the heart of Demacia. The air smells of polished armor and fear, and Aatrox, a storm of rage bound to steel, is about to crash against a nation built on honor. Tonight, we dive into his brutal clash with Demacia's forces, where he mocks their ideals of justice and carves a path of chaos. Let's step into this battlefield, feeling the cold weight of a blade that laughs at righteousness. Aatrox's blade had been smuggled into Demacia by a disgraced knight named Tauren, a man whose faith in honor had cracked like cheap glass. He found the blade in a black market caravan, its runes glowing like embers in the dark. "You seek justice," Aatrox whispered, his voice a low rumble, like a storm brewing over stone. Tauren, bitter from exile, gripped the blade, and Aatrox surged in, twisting his body into a towering mockery of knighthood, muscles bulging, eyes burning red. They stormed a Demacian outpost, Aatrox driving Tauren through ranks of silver-armored soldiers. The blade sang, slicing through shields like they were paper, and Aatrox laughed, a sound deeper than a cathedral bell. "Your honor is dust," he roared through Tauren's throat, mocking the soldiers' cries of valor. "If I were there, I'd have ducked behind a barricade faster than you can say, 'bad career choice.'" Here's a quirky tidbit. Demacian soldiers claimed Aatrox's blade left faint sparks that formed fleeting sun shapes in the air, like taunting graffiti. Locals called it the Darkin's mockery, swearing it spooked their war horses. Scholars debate whether this was Aatrox's magic or just battlefield panic. My bet's on Aatrox, because he's extra like that. Back to the story. The clash was a slaughter. Aatrox waded through Demacia's forces, his blade a whirlwind of blood and starlight, shattering formations trained to face mortals, not gods. A captain named Lycera faced him, her great sword raised, shouting. For Demacia's light, Aatrox parried her strike, his laugh shaking the ground. "Light I am the eclipse," he snarled, and Lycera's blade snapped like a twig. The Demacians fought with discipline, but Aatrox was chaos incarnate, mocking their ideals with every swing. Tauren's body, though, was a ticking clock. His skin cracked, his bones groaned under Aatrox's power, but the Darkin pushed harder, relishing the carnage. He drove Tauren into a Demacian fortress, its walls gleaming with petricite, a stone said to dampen magic. Aatrox felt its pull, a faint tug on his essence, but he shrugged it off, whispering, "Your stones can't hold me." The fortress fell, its defenders scattered, and Aatrox stood atop the rubble, blade planted in the ground. Tauren's voice a growl. "This is your honor, the Demacians' faith in justice, their shining armor. It was all a joke to him, as flimsy as my attempts at keeping plants alive." Aatrox's rage wasn't just at them. It was at the Celestials who'd made him this way, who'd turned a warrior into a weapon. The academic debate here is a nightly brawl. Did Aatrox target Demacia to shatter its ideals? Or was it just another stop on his rampage? I'd say he saw their honor as a mirror of his own lost purpose. Smashing it felt good. Aatrox carved another sun symbol into his blade's essence, a defiant mark against the gods. But the crimson pendant, still tucked in Tauren's belt, pulsed faintly, its warmth a cruel reminder of Shurima's lost glory. Tauren's body was failing, his heart stuttering like a bad engine. Aatrox pushed him into one last charge, cutting through a Demacian cavalry line before Tauren collapsed, the blade falling amid shattered lances. Aatrox retreated into the steel, his rage undimmed, waiting for the next fool to claim him. Picture the blade now, lying in Demacia's ruins, its runes glowing under a moon that offers no mercy. Joke aside, it's like crashing a party you weren't invited to. Aatrox doesn't care. He's here to ruin the vibe. As I whisper this tale, I feel the clash of steel, the weight of Aatrox's scorn, and the faint hum of a pendant that stirs a rage he can't escape. Part 13. I'm back, your late-night whisperer, threading through the jagged edges of Aatrox's tormented saga, with a voice as soft as a Shuriman twilight, but with a bite to keep you tethered to this tale. We're standing in a desolate wasteland now, the air thick with dust and echoes, where Aatrox's blade lies in the hands of a broken host, its runes pulsing like a heart that refuses to stop. Picture a shattered battlefield littered with rusted armor and forgotten banners as Aatrox grapples with something unexpected, a flicker of his lost humanity, a whisper of redemption that threatens to unravel his rage. Tonight, we dive into a rare moment where the Darkin questions his endless war, haunted by memories he can't quite bury. Let's walk this shadowed path, feeling the weight of a blade that carries a soul too stubborn to fade. Aatrox's latest host was a Freljordian outcast named Bjorn, a warrior whose tribe had cast him out for defying their warlord. He found the blade in a trader's cart, its hilt warm despite the icy winds. "You seek purpose," Aatrox whispered, his voice a low growl, like fire crackling in a blizzard. Bjorn gripped the blade, and Aatrox surged in, twisting his body into a monstrous form, eyes glowing red, muscles swelling like a storm cloud. They roamed the Freljord's frozen wastes, Aatrox driving Bjorn to slaughter bandits and raiders, his blade carving through ice and flesh with equal ease. But something was different this time. Bjorn, unlike Aatrox's other hosts, wasn't just a vessel of rage. He was a man who'd once sung lullabies to his sister, who'd carved wooden toys for his village's children. Aatrox felt it, a faint echo of warmth in Bjorn's memories, and it stirred something he hadn't felt in centuries' doubt. Here's a quirky tidbit. Freljordian warriors like Bjorn often carried small bone charms, etched with runes for protection. Bjorn's charm, tucked in his belt beside the crimson pendant, hummed faintly when Aatrox took over, like it was trying to sing him calm. Scholars debate whether these charms held real power or were just superstition. I'm betting on superstition because no charm's stopping a Darkin. Back to the story. Aatrox, through Bjorn, stood atop a frozen cliff, the blade planted in the snow, staring at a village below. Its fires glowed softly, and children's laughter drifted up, carried by the wind. Bjorn's memories flooded Aatrox nights by a hearth, a sister's smile, a life before war. "What am I?" Aatrox muttered, his voice softer, almost human. For a moment, he wondered if redemption was possible, if he could be more than a blade. It's like finding an old photo in your pocket and realizing you miss who you were except for Aatrox. It's a punch to the gut, but rage is a hard habit to break. Aatrox shook off the doubt, snarling, "I am no mortal." He drove Bjorn into a raid against a rival tribe, the Blade, a whirlwind of blood and ice. "This is my purpose," he roared. Bjorn's voice warped into a growl that shook the tundra. The crimson pendant pulsed at Bjorn's belt, its warmth mocking Aatrox's fleeting thoughts of peace. He carved through warriors, their axes no match for his starlit blade. But each kill felt hollow, like eating junk food when you're starving for something real. Bjorn's body was crumbling, his skin cracking like frostbitten stone, his breaths ragged. Aatrox whispered, "Fight, mortal." But Bjorn's memories kept creeping in, a child's laugh, a lullaby's tune. It's like trying to ignore a song stuck in your head, except this one makes you question your whole existence. The academic debate here is a frosty one. Did Aatrox's glimpses of humanity weaken his resolve? Or were they just a cruel trick of his curse? I'd say they're a reminder. Even Darkin can't outrun their past. Rage is loud, but regret is louder. Aatrox carved another sun symbol into his blade's essence, a defiant mark, but it felt more like a plea. Bjorn collapsed in a snowdrift, the blade falling beside him, the pendant's glow faint under the aurora. Aatrox retreated into the steel, his rage burning but unsteady, like a fire caught in a storm. Picture the blade now, half buried in ice, its runes glowing faintly, surrounded by a silence that feels heavier than the snow. Joke aside, it's like trying to forget a dream that felt too real you can't, and it drives you a little mad. As I whisper this tale, I feel the Freljord's chill, the weight of Aatrox's doubt, and the echo of a lullaby that dares to challenge a Darkin's wrath. I'm back, your midnight whisperer, gliding through the fractured remnants of Aatrox's cursed tale, with a voice as soft as a void-touched breeze, but with just enough edge to keep you tethered to this story. We're standing in a desolate wasteland now, where the air hums with an unnatural pulse, and Aatrox's blade, clutched by a failing host, glows with a rage that could shatter worlds. Picture a scarred battlefield under a sickly purple sky, where the ground pulses with void corruption, and Aatrox faces an enemy unlike any other, not gods or mortals, but the void itself. Tonight, we dive into his brutal clash with void creatures, a battle driven by his desire to destroy all creation. Let's tread this apocalyptic path, feeling the weight of a blade that hungers for the end. Aatrox's latest host was a bilgewater pirate named Sorin, a scarred man with a penchant for trouble and a death wish to match. He'd stolen the blade from a smuggler's cache, its runes glowing like embers in the fog. "You seek annihilation," Aatrox whispered, his voice a low growl, like waves crashing against a doomed ship. Sorin gripped the blade, and Aatrox surged in, twisting his body into a monstrous form, eyes burning red, limbs swollen with unnatural strength. They roamed a corrupted coastline where the void had torn open a rift, spilling creatures that skittered like nightmares made flesh. Aatrox fueled by centuries of rage, saw the void as a mirror of his own despair, a force that consumed without purpose. "I'll end you all," he roared through Sorin's throat, his blade raised against the rift's glow. If I were Sorin, I'd have ditched the blade faster than a sinking ship, but Aatrox had other plans. Here's a quirky tidbit. Void rifts, like the one Aatrox faced, were said to emit a faint hum that mimicked heartbeats, driving nearby animals mad. Sailors called it the void's pulse, claiming it made fish swim in circles. Scholars debate whether this was a magical phenomenon or just bad acoustics, my bets on the void being extra creepy. Back to the story. Aatrox charged the rift, his blade a comet of blood and starlight, carving through void spawn with a ferocity that shook the earth. The creature's claws, eyes, and teeth in all the wrong places lunged, but Aatrox was a storm, his wings tearing through their forms like paper. "You are nothing," he snarled. Sorin's voice warped into a thunderclap. The rift pulsed, spitting out a hulking abomination, its body a mass of writhing tendrils. Aatrox laughed, a sound deeper than the ocean's depths, and met it head on, his blade slicing through its core. The battle was chaos, but Aatrox reveled in it. Each kill fed his hunger to destroy, to unmake the world that had betrayed him. The void, though, wasn't like mortal armies. It didn't fear, didn't falter. A tendril grazed Sorin's chest, and Aatrox felt the sting, a reminder of his host's fragility. "Keep fighting," he growled, pushing Sorin's body to its limits, blood seeping from cracked skin. The crimson pendant, still at Sorin's belt, pulsed faintly, its warmth a cruel contrast to the void's cold hunger. Aatrox's rage burned hotter, driven by a thought he couldn't shake. If he destroyed everything, maybe his pain would end. It's like smashing your phone to stop spam calls drastic. But you get the urge. Sorin's body staggered, his heart pounding like a drum solo gone wrong. But Aatrox kept swinging, determined to bury the void in its own ruin. The academic debate here is a cosmic slugfest. Did Aatrox fight the void to prove his dominance? Or was it a desperate bid to end his own existence? I'd say it's both rage and despair are two sides of the same cursed coin. Aatrox carved another sun symbol into his blade's essence, a defiant mark against the Celestials and the void alike. The rift collapsed under his onslaught, its creatures reduced to ash, but Sorin's body gave out, collapsing in the sand, the blade falling beside him. Aatrox retreated into the steel, his rage undimmed but heavier, like a storm that can't break. Picture the blade now, half buried in corrupted sand, its runes glowing faintly under a purple sky, surrounded by the void's fading echoes. Joke aside, it's like fighting a glitch in a game you can't quit. You win, but it doesn't feel like victory. As I whisper this tale, I feel the rift's cold pulse, the weight of Aatrox's wrath, and the faint hum of a pendant that dares to mock his endless war. I'm back, your Twilight Whisperer, guiding you through the final threads of Aatrox's curse saga with a voice as soft as a fading star, but with just enough edge to keep you tethered to this tale. We're standing in a shattered wasteland now, where the air is heavy with ash and despair, and Aatrox's blade, clutched by a dying host, pulses with a rage that could end worlds. Picture a barren plain under a blood-red sky, littered with the bones of battles long forgotten, where Aatrox faces the truth of his eternal curse. Tonight, we dive into the moment he accepts his fate, vowing to destroy all creation in defiance of the gods who betrayed him. Let's walk this final path, feeling the weight of a blade that carries a Darkin's unending wrath. Aatrox's latest host was a wandering swordsman named Vera, a man with no home and a heart full of scars. He found the blade in a ruined Ionian shrine, its runes glowing like embers in the dusk. "You seek eternity," Aatrox whispered, his voice a low rumble, like thunder trapped in stone. Vera gripped the blade, and Aatrox surged in, twisting his body into a monstrous form, eyes burning red, limbs swollen with unnatural power. They roamed a desolate battlefield, Aatrox driving Vera through remnants of a war-torn army, his blade carving through steel and bone like a scythe through wheat. Each swing was a declaration, a scream against the Celestials who'd made him a prisoner. "I am Aatrox," he roared through Vera's throat, his voice shaking the earth. "If I were Vera, I'd have dropped the blade faster than a hot potato," but Aatrox's will was iron. Here's a quirky tidbit. Ionian locals swore that Aatrox's blade left faint trails of red mist after each kill, like a painter's brush gone rogue. They called it the Darkin's breath, claiming it smelled of iron and sorrow. Scholars debate whether this was magic or just battlefield haze. My bet's on magic, because Aatrox doesn't do subtle. Back to the story. Aatrox stood atop a hill of corpses, Vera's body trembling, the crimson pendant at his belt pulsing faintly. For centuries, Aatrox had fought gods, mortals, void, but now he saw the truth. His curse was eternal. The Celestials hadn't just trapped him, they'd made him a force of destruction, a blade that could never rest. "This is my forever," he whispered, Vera's voice soft, almost broken. The pendant's warmth stirred memories of Shurima's son, of laughter, of a man he'd buried under rage. But Aatrox embraced his fate, choosing annihilation over redemption. He drove Vera into one last battle, against an Ionian militia defending their village. The blade sang, tearing through spears and shields, and Aatrox laughed, a sound deeper than a collapsing star. "All will fall," he roared, his swings a symphony of chaos. Vera's body was crumbling, his skin cracking like dry clay, his heart stuttering. Aatrox didn't care. He'd accepted his role as Runeterra's end. The crimson pendant pulsed, its glow a cruel reminder of a past he'd never reclaim. But Aatrox no longer sought salvation. "If I cannot be free," he growled, "then nothing will be. It's like deciding to burn your house down because the Wi-Fi's bad extreme." But you feel his point. The academic debate here is a cosmic showdown. Did Aatrox's acceptance of his curse make him a tragic figure or a monster? I'd say he's both tragedy and terror wrapped in one angry package. Aatrox carved one final sun symbol into his blade's essence, a defiant mark against the gods who'd shaped him. Vera collapsed, the blade falling amid the village's ruins, its runes glowing under a blood-red sky. Aatrox retreated into the steel, his vow clear he'd destroy everything gods, mortals, even the stars, if it meant defying his curse. Picture the blade now, half buried in ash, its glow a challenge to a world that dares to exist. Joke aside, it's like being stuck in a game you can't win, so you decide to break the board. As I whisper this tale, my voice slows, softens, the air growing heavy with the weight of Aatrox's choice. The battlefield fades, a crimson glow lingers, and his blade hums faintly, a promise of ruin that never sleeps. Rest now. Let the darkness cradle you as Aatrox's rage echoes into eternity. As the night deepens, my voice softens, a gentle murmur to guide you into rest. Aatrox's tale, a saga of rage and ruin, stretches across Shurima's sands to Ionia's ashes. Born a warrior, he was forged into an ascended god, his blade a beacon of Shuriman glory. But the Celestials betrayed him, twisting his power into a curse, trapping his soul in a blade that hungers for blood. Through centuries, Aatrox whispered to mortals Kael, Tharok, Bjorn, Vera, promising power, only to consume their bodies in his quest for freedom. Each host fell, their flesh too frail for a Darkin's wrath. Yet Aatrox pressed on, carving sun symbols into his prison, defying the gods who made him. In Noxus, he shattered armies. In Targon, he clashed with Pantheon. In Shurima, he wandered ruins, haunted by a crimson pendant that stirred lost memories. The void met his blade, but even its chaos couldn't sate him. In Demacia, he mocked honor. In the Freljord, he glimpsed redemption, only to reject it. Aatrox's final vow was to unmake all creation, a rebellion against an eternity of torment. His blade, now silent in Ionia's ruins, glows faintly, waiting for the next fool to claim it. The air grows still, the crimson pendant's warmth fades, and Aatrox's rage lingers, a whisper in the dark. As you drift to sleep, imagine that blade under a blood-red sky, its hum a lullaby of destruction. Let the world fade, the stars dim, and rest in the quiet, knowing Aatrox's war never ends. Sleep now, softly, as his shadow stretches across Runeterra.